Okay. We now call to order the Board of Trustees meeting for February 2nd, 2021. This meeting is being held pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, modified for remote meetings during the COVID pandemic. May I please have a roll call?
Trustee Chamberlain.
Here.
Trustee Clayton.
Here.
Trustee Goldstein.
Here.
Trustee Haber.
Here.
Trustee Hollander.
Here.
Trustee Jamerson.
Here.
President Norris.
Here. Before we go further, I would like to point out to everyone that we should not be using chat messages during these meetings because those are not recorded. Second, if they don't go to everyone, that doesn't work right either. The Open Meetings Act says that it's all supposed to be oral communication that can be recorded. So please don't use the chat communication, as tempting as it may be. We'll dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance since we are all in different locations. First item of business is approval of minutes from the Board of Trustees meeting of January 19, 2021. Only Jerry caught that we had that for the wrong date.
I'll move.
Second.
We have amended minutes in the record right now. Are there any other additions or corrections? Hearing none, then a roll call, please, on a motion to approve the minutes of January 19th, 2021.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, next item, Director of Community Services report.
Well, I had a meeting this morning with the man from State Farm. We had a good conversation. He was a little distraught that he had to move his trailer, and he's going to put together a letter, which I just found out he sent out this afternoon, that he wants the board to read, and he'd like to come in front of the board next meeting and plead his case. He's got some ideas. I told him that was his right. So we'll see him in 2 weeks, and we'll see what he has to say.
He has a number of things about COVID, et cetera. So obviously we will try to work with him. Russ and I'll see if there's some way to comply with our ordinances, and if not, if there's something that might be acceptable to you. But certainly he can't be doing what he's been doing in any event.
So it was a good conversation. So other than that, Mr. Score has been reg tagged. I have not heard from him. I tried to stop by and knock on his door today. Nobody answered. So I don't know if he's around or home. Didn't look like anybody was there at the time. So I'll try again Friday and see what happens. And do you want to talk about the snow contract now, John? Or what?
Yeah, we can talk about that now as well. Russ had the snowplow contractor. We got him in today to sit down and talk about it. He pointed out, and I think he's probably right, that the format we used was more for plowing parking lots, because otherwise it really doesn't make sense that you would be having that low level between the individual pushes just because it's more snow. He's driving around as much, et cetera. So we're working on how to word that so we get the numbers squared out. He's honoring the contract as it stands now anyway, but I think when we put out the new RFP, we need to specify and think about exactly what we're talking about when we say per push or per snowstorm, or exactly how it works, because we got some combination of the above. So Henry, the bills that you gave, we looked at it, it was the lowest 2 or 3 inch rate, and that would have been appropriate for the amount of snow that had fallen in between. So it was only 1 push. So we just didn't do it that clearly. He's going to be honoring what we had, as we say, and hopefully we've gotten our snow other than this weekend that's forecast again. And we'll get it right next time and make sure we spell out more clearly exactly what we're talking about. Obviously, we always have the option of the flat fee contract for all of the plowing over the winter.
Right.
But if you think about it, if it snows 10 inches, it shouldn't cost you more than it does if it snows 3 inches 3 times. So we've got to work that out to make sure that the numbers add up right. That,
And that thousand, I think it was $1,087 or $78, whatever our lowest fee was. I found the node contract, the last one that I did before I had retired back in 2011 to 2015 with D&M. And surprisingly, their snow for the 2 to 6 inch rate with their bid was $930 for their push back then. So you got to figure 10 years has gone by, and the contract went up maybe a little, but $150 over 10 years for the push rate. So that's really isn't a bad deal.
we're also going to look at the salt, which Trustee
Right.
Jamerson and I mentioned. And apparently we can get county salt delivered directly to him if we buy at the county rate. I had been told that we had to have it where we stored it, which we had no facility for. But apparently we can have it delivered directly to him, and it cost about 1/3 of what he's paying for salt.
Right.
So if we can get that, that'll reduce his rate. Yes, Rick?
My comment about the salt was that I think we should try and use as little of it as possible. I think we're over salting our streets
Right.
in general, all of them. And I know that a lot of the other suburbs around us they put less salt on the residential side streets than they do on their thoroughfares. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but I just think that in general, they've been always ever since I've been on the board, they put too much salt everywhere, especially around the village hall. It's like,
Right.
Oh,
Well, we talked about that, and Rick, we did talk about the putting the salt down too early on the residential side streets. For example, Sunday morning, I was looking and they'd done a good job of clearing everywhere. It was wet on Port Wine, but Hoffman was still snowpacked because there wasn't enough traffic for the ice melter to actually be cutting it. It probably should be going down later. So he agreed, and we're going to be looking at it, and hopefully we will have a more efficient use, but still keep the streets clean and have a lower rate for the salt. So
he had some good ideas too. So in the spring, we get set to go out for bids for a new contract. We can sit down and come up with some new ideas and maybe bid a couple different ways and see which way is more efficient this time.
So again, it may not have been the best over the last year or so, but we seem to be picking up some pretty good ideas through this.
That's all I got for now, John.
Any questions for us? Yes, Cheryl? You're still muted.
Yeah,
Okay.
for whatever reason, the space bars are not working. I know in the past, we also had the snowplow people put down, they put down beet juice for us instead of
Yes, that's-
just salt. I
that's-
don't know if that's still possible.
It should be. Pat can probably address that. And again, we will have that in an RFP. But I think that may be going down as well. I would have to double check that. Russ, did he mention it to you?
No, he didn't, but you know what? I'll contact him and just see if that's an idea. I know our village uses it, like we have the big snowfalls coming, our public works goes out ahead of time and uses the beet juice, and it cuts down the salt consumption. So it can't hurt to ask him and see if he's got that advantage or he's got those resources to do it.
And again, we
Thank
keep
you.
saying salt, and it's not actually salt. It's
Right.
it's snow melter. Because we
Right.
want something that is more friendly.
Ecology friendly. Yes,
So
but I will
any
find
oth-
out. I will find out about the beet juice. That's not a problem.
We'll
Thank you.
follow up on that. Any other questions for Russ or on, say snow plowing and then for Russ? Okay. Plan Commission report?
I don't think Lori is here tonight.
No, she's not.
We'll be meeting just in a couple of nights, a Thursday night, and looking at revised TIF guidelines, just slightly revised. One of the things that everyone mentioned as comment about the TIF guidelines was maybe to include some material on affordable housing. So we included that as a goal, and that led to a series of discussions and thoughts about maybe revisiting just where we are in the village. We did a small update, a 2020 update of the affordable housing plan in the village, really just brought forward our historical data. It turned out that what we projected in 2005 and what is the case in 2020 were nearly an exact overlap, which is to say we had very few houses that, new houses built at the first place, almost no new lots, very few new lots. Most of the construction was a tear down on an existing lot. So the update was really just a reporting on those trends. The goal that the village has as one of the 3 or 4 goals that we're allowed to have under the Affordable Housing Planning Act was that new housing units, we are fortunate to have new housing units created, would be, we would add 15% of the new units as affordable units. Under the Affordable Housing Planning Act, by the way, when you tear down a house and rebuild a new one, that's not considered a new unit. So we haven't really had an opportunity, since we haven't had just very few vacant lots where we could construct anything. We've had almost no opportunity up to now. If development goes forward on Federal Life's parcel in some way, it would be the first opportunity we had. So just a heads up that there are a number of materials that we prepared for the Plan Commission so that we could dig into that a little bit and understand some of the options available.
That's Henry.
Is my memory correct that we have 5 buildable lots in the village?
Well,
I wouldn't want to, I think that's what we thought, that there were actually vacant lots in that number, but
I think with the 2020 update may have tried to count those. Pat has a map at times that he tries to update, but it's not far from that number.
So if we wanted to meet the affordable housing criteria, we would exceed it by having 1 lot meet the criteria. Theoretically, we could not meet, is that correct?
I don't, well, it depends whether those were lots that were never built on, if that's what you meant.
because some of these had houses before.
So it's a small number, but at any rate, we found a number of materials that we thought would be interesting, and tried to provide some comparisons with some of the neighboring villages and what they had tried to accomplish with a few recent projects. That's just a basis for comparison. So that's Thursday night at the Plan
Rick,
Commission.
you'd had a question?
I do. So there's the lot on Blackthorn that was in receivership. The house was torn down. It's actually 2 lots, and the house was straddling the lots. So do you consider that that there was a house on both of those lots, on one of the lots? And if so, either way, can the village force a private landowner to build an affordable house?
No.
Okay.
It's not something we can actually do. It's just that if we don't meet the criteria, then someone coming in could potentially be pushing for housing that might not otherwise meet our zoning, et cetera. So it's not as direct as it might sound, but it's a good goal to strive for in any event. So, but
Okay.
no, you can't force a developer to build it coming in or something like that. We can encourage it, et cetera, but
Well, we could do
force
that on the
somebody to
federal
make an
life.
individual house.
We could do it on the federal life property because they're going to have to ask for rezoning, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And with the TIF and other things where we could put it into various ways that we can try to make it happen, but it's a little hard to go in that other direction. All right, Bruce, anything else for?
No, I just wanted to provide a little context for why we have all this on the discussion.
Okay.
For
Any
Thursday
other
night.
questions for the Plan Commission? Treasurer's report. We got something this afternoon from the accountants. I haven't had a chance to really look at it. I don't know if you have, Mr. Clayton. So bear with us. We'll get it to you at the next meeting. This is the information that it's been pointed out to me. We've stopped putting in the Village Voice and not gotten onto the website as well as we should. So we're going to start working to try to get these reports back out there. The public certainly should know what we're doing and be aware of the efforts we're making to keep the budget balanced, et cetera. Mike?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize what you were talking about. Yes, I did, excuse me, get that. And I've sent them back 4 or 5 comments on what, the report content should be and so on and so forth. So we're working forward on that.
So hopefully we'll have something then for you at the next meeting on that. Mike's been very diligent with that and I appreciate his efforts. Consultants, Gowald Hamilton.
I thought I would update the board on where we're at with polling the neighbors on Riverwoods Road to gauge their interest in a potential water project. Mayor Norris, do you have that
Yep,
map?
getting there.
So we did, Katie and Chief Dano were very helpful in doing pretty much everything we could to make contact with all the folks along the corridor. We've now heard from all but one. We are still at 2 people expressing interest, one of which, of course, is Mr. Tiskaris, who's been before the board a number of times. Then we did have one other resident that was at least interested to hear more. I did call the homeowner on Forest Glen Trail 3 times and left 3 voicemails just asking that they please call me back to have a discussion. I never heard anything back from them. So, I don't know what more we can do to solicit people's opinions about running water. And I guess I didn't want to just leave this hanging, but I don't have a lot of ideas about how to, other ideas about how we can move forward to address the specific issue at 2375 Riverwoods Road.
Well, I'd agree. It's kind of difficult. Certainly, we don't have the interest to be able to put the main all the way down. And we've been very good to be kind to contact the neighbor for the easement. So I think we can still try, but I don't think we need to continue to put a great deal of effort into it. Any disagreement from the board?
Well, I would, the one thing the village can always do is you can build that part of the project as a village project, collect the 1 connection fee you're going to get and, set the connection rate going forward, maybe even with a component to reimburse the village for putting out the money now. But, I don't know the facts exactly because we've had him here and he's spoken before, but if he really doesn't have water that's usable, or it's really getting bad and he can't get cooperation from a neighbor, it's at least an option that the village can consider.
Well, we did, the board wasn't interested before. The board can always change its mind again. So the options out there. Rick, you were starting to say something, I think.
Well, yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I don't think from what I've heard that this particular owner has explored putting in a new well. That's my recollection. And I'll say this again, I said it before. The concern is that if you put this water main in for this one house, maybe 2, and hope that we're going to recoup this, there's going to be a lot of other people in town that are going to want this same help from the village to get water to their house. And I think we're opening up a Pandora's box, just my opinion.
Yeah, unless we can devise a series of criteria and independent tests or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very expensive for one resident for right now. So, okay, oh yes, Cheryl, by the way, when we have a shared screen up, I have to work to be able to see all of you at one given moment. So if I don't call on you, please yell out. So Cheryl?
Yo. Yeah, so I I had the same concern as trustee Jamerson. And in addition, I don't recall because water, the initiation of water mains precedes my time on the board. If we have ever had a situation like this, so in the one instance, have we had a situation like this where we don't know if the resident had explored an additional well? And two, let's say he already had a very deep well, but I don't think he did. And there were no other options left, what we did in those instances. And the reason I'm asking about those two instances is because whatever we do, we have to remain consistent throughout the village. Otherwise, we are going to have a whole host of problems.
We've never had anything like this in my approximately 25 years. The only time a resident got a water main was when that resident paid for it with the understanding that they would be getting a recapture from their neighbors as they signed on. But I
Okay,
can't think of any instance where there was only one entity who was involved and we put the water in.
then I think
There
we need
was-
to be, go ahead, Pat.
There was one similar situation up on Duffy. In that case, the property owners, the county came and tested their well, and I forget what exactly nastiness was in there, but it was they had a pollution problem, and the village worked out a recapture agreement through which that property owner paid. I want to say it was a short run of water main, but that property owner paid something over $50,000. And then we established a recapture agreement for the two other properties for that person to recoup if and when those properties ever connected.
Okay, so if we have a similar situation here, then I think, we could do that same thing. But if it's instead a matter of this particular residence well wasn't very deep, and a new well, digging a new well would at a deeper level would solve the problem, I think that needs to be explored.
So I will, I'll get in touch with the property owner and just tell him where we're at, and that there's not a village project here, and I'll talk to him about other options, what we've done in other places, and just try to work with him to see how we can help him solve his problem.
That makes sense. I think that's the right approach. Any other comments from the board? All right, Pat. Oh, yes, Mike Haber.
I just have a question for Pat, maybe. I'm just wondering how much, I don't think there's any fire hydrants along Riverwoods Road until you get to like what, Woodland
Studio, right?
Studio? So how much of an issue is that from a village-wide perspective? Like, should we be considering that as another element which would potentially mitigate, why we'd want to have water along, or give us a justification to have, water main extended?
It's always a consideration. It's difficult to put a dollar value on it. We've explored this, of course, and Trustee Haber, you were there when we for various other special service areas, fire protection was legitimately brought up as a benefit. At least in the past, it's been the case that from a pure financial perspective, everybody in Riverwoods, their homeowners insurance, I guess, is based on the zip code. So there's really no savings directly to property owners. And when we brought the fire department in of course, they said, yeah, we'd like to have hydrants everywhere, but no, there's no place we can't fight a fire. So, I mean, the short answer, I guess, is certainly fire hydrants are of benefit, but it's difficult to put a particular value.
Pat, I will disagree with you on the insurance element because I know my company asked how far away is the nearest fire hydrant, and unfortunately it's across the street, so I have about $75 annually off my premium.
Okay,
Now,
yeah.
$75 is not going to go a long way toward the cost of putting the water in.
Does Vernon Township still have, does our fire district still have a pumper? A tanker?
I believe they do because they
Oh.
have some unincorporated areas as well as large portions of the village do not have water. So
Well, all of their trucks, I can answer this question because I asked the question when I moved in here because I did not have municipal water, and it's a half a mile from my house to the nearest fire hydrant. And at that time, they had, every one of their trucks has a minimum of 375 gallons on it, which doesn't sound like a lot of water, which is what I said. But the chief said, well, we don't spray it all on at one time. And as the next truck comes, so they do have a plan on how they're going to fight a fire. We have to be careful on the fire hydrant issue though, because all of South Riverwoods, most of it has no fire hydrants. So I shouldn't say South River, Vernon Woods has no fire hydrants. So if we're going to make that, once again, we have to be careful about the precedent we set because other people that want water are going to use that precedent even if they have wells that are working.
I can also address the water tanks. The only thing they do with that water is try to get the people out of the house. It's not enough to save one of our houses if it's heavily involved, which it normally is going to be by the time they get there. So if you think about the last time we had a fire where there was no fire hydrant, it was a total loss. So it's all reality. It would be better to have fire hydrants, there's no question. But that hasn't been enough to put it over. And when we've talked about SSAs, a number of residents have resisted it, saying that that's not enough, et cetera. So it's always a hard question. Any other comments on the water issue? None? Pat, do you have anything else this evening?
Yeah, I have one other comment on a different water issue, which is I still don't have a quote from Census for the automatic meter reading system, but we are working with them. I'm in regular communication with them. This time I will not boldly predict that I'll have something for the next board meeting. So hopefully I will.
Right, any questions for the village engineer? Yes, Mr. Clayton.
Some time ago, I think, we discussed the possibility of doing some phase one engineering for pathways, some selected pathways in the village so that we could qualify for grants. If that's true, is there any progress on that or what's happening?
I agree. Yes, we did discuss it. Nothing has been brought to the board. I don't think it has been advanced.
Well, we prioritized that with Saunders Road being the first place we went for the phase one engineering to try and get the federal grant. That's not been completed, nor do we know whether that really does work. So I think maybe we've held off on the paths. If the board wants, we can move forward on those as well. But the correct answer, as Pat said, is no, we haven't done anything on the paths yet.
And can I just add, if we do proceed, so we actually have a plan that indicates which paths are of greatest priority. We can always change it, but as long as we have the plan, we might as well start with the plan that we already have. And Saunders is one of those that's been identified.
Oh, and we are definitely exploring, on-road bike lanes as well as a bike path for Saunders Road. That is part of the phase one engineering.
Okay, any other questions for the engineer? None. Village attorney?
Just a reminder that we will have to start working on the appropriations ordinance pretty soon, and I don't know to what extent. I started with the worst thing first. I don't know to what extent people are getting in budget numbers to Trustee Clayton or how you're doing it this year, but just because of COVID and are not being together very much, I thought I would mention it because it comes up faster than you think when we have to get a notice out and everything in
Well, we
March.
have the budget for this year for this appropriation. And I don't know that we've modified it, so. you're
Well,
thinking
that's the,
about
yeah.
2021?
If we can take, 1.15 of the budget or, 10%, whatever we're going to take, if that's still the correct budget, that's the question.
Yes, Henry?
We're talking about for budget year 2022?
Well,
That's what I was
it's-
asking. I think.
No, no, no,
21.
this is the authority to spend money in 2021.
We're in 2021.
Henry, stop trying to be logical with Illinois statutes.
I'm just saying, we're appropriating money that will be spent in 2021. And so we have some carryover authority from the prior year.
So,
I didn't make this system up.
Mr. Clayton,
Bruce, this is something you and I can work on. So I think it's relatively straightforward because we do have budget numbers for everything for this year.
Fine, okay. Just wanted to throw that out. I put in a few phone calls on the last mile distribution center to see if they had any news for us. No one's gotten back to me. I assume they're either having discussions with the seller or trying to figure out if, what the contract terms would be. I was contacted by an attorney who was contacted by parties in the transaction and thought this attorney might be involved in some way. So, maybe something is going on. I answered a few questions, but I've not heard anything concrete. I did correspond briefly with the attorney who's negotiating for the buyer of the Federal Life property. I thought it was completely under contract. Apparently, there's still a few items that they're working out, but he told me that they expected to be contacting us relatively soon to try and sit down and work with us closely. I don't know exactly when that will happen, but I just wanted to let the board know that's what I know. Last thing is I want to.
Bruce, Henry has a question.
Really goes to Pat that it might affect this.
He's in the dark right now.
Do we need to know exactly the area for the water detention that the county is going to be taking from the Federal Life property? That this might affect what comes before us when Bruce gets involved with the attorney and what they want to do with the Federal Life property, or is that something that can happen later on?
We've been actively making sure that we stay ahead of that. My office was working closely with Chris Burke's office, the engineers for the county, so that we understood exactly what they were proposing to take from the Fed Life property when we worked up that concept plan for Fed Life. And we're also making sure right now we're also looking at Colonial Court to make sure that if storage needs to be reserved someplace on Federal Life for a future redevelopment of the Colonial Court property, that we're not boxing ourselves in by not accommodating that at this point. So we're taking a holistic stormwater approach to the entire quadrant up there to make sure that everybody's accounted for and we don't plan ourselves into a corner, if you will.
Bruce, do you know if we have to be at all concerned about a potential road and the land being set aside for that at this point, or is that something that is dealt with at some future time?
We've shared our concept plan with this attorney representing the buyer, and they know that we've talked about having an access road, and Federal Life certainly knows, and they know that they'll be having all kinds of discussions with us about their land use plan. So we'll try and address it.
And the
everything
county
else.
knows as far as the water detention and the impact of a road in there, as far as trying to plan around that too, so. Okay, Bruce.
The last thing I wanted to talk about is an issue that is coming up because in May we'll have new elected officials, and it has to do with some of the intergovernmental agreements that we have, particularly with SWALCO, the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, and also with the North Suburban Special Recreation Area, NSSRA. We have intergovernmental agreements with both of those bodies, and one of the things we do is appoint a representative to those bodies. So in the case of SWACO, it's the mayor. In the case of the NSSRA, a few years ago, when Chris went off the board and wanted to continue on, we created a position so that she could be the village representative to the NSSRA. Before that, it had always been a village trustee. One of the questions that came up was, can these kind of roles continue? Is there a problem with, in the case of a mayor holding office, can the mayor also be on the board with SWACO? Or if John leaves, can John be continue as a representative in the way that Chris has? Chris becomes mayor, can she continue on the board with the NSSRA? So I spent a couple of fruitless mornings trying to learn the law of incompatible offices. And what I stumbled upon, probably in a dream, was that actually the positions that John holds on the NSSRA board, or that Chris holds on the, I'm sorry, that John holds on SWACO and that Chris holds on the NSSRA board, are not public offices in the same way that elected or appointed positions are usually. And the doctrine of incompatible offices had to do with someone, say, being a park district commissioner, which is an elected position, and someone being a village trustee at the same time. The intergovernmental agreements are kind of a unique case because we join with other communities and we agree to bylaws which give the joint board that we compose with the other communities or agencies, we give that joint board the authority to take decisions that affect us. But yet the bylaws require that, in the case of SWACO, the bylaws require that it be an elected official or the chief executive officer of the village. So the whole structure of these intergovernmental agreements is that we create a sort of a supra body that can look at regional interest or concerns of a number of agencies, and we take representatives from each of the underlying boards to them, who are the representatives of our village, the representatives of the other agencies, but then they vote for what those bodies are trying to accomplish. In that case, I think because those board positions at SWACO or at the North Suburban Recreation Area, because those board positions are created by bylaws and are voluntary sort of contractual arrangements, they don't fall within the same rubric of incompatible offices. It took me quite a while to come to that, but I talked to a couple of other people in the municipal field and everyone struggles with this issue all the time. So that's a long way of saying that what we've been doing historically is what everyone else is doing with these kind of intergovernmental groups. And I think that the mayor would enjoy continuing on with SWACO. Their bylaws may have to be adjusted to allow that because right now they require only elected officials. But just as we have done before, we could designate someone to be the representative for the village to those bodies. So I wanted to just sort of discuss that with the board. Generally speaking, I know it'll come up later in the year. I don't know what SWACO is going to do with their bylaws. The NSSRA, I've talked with their council. They would be very content, would prefer if Chris, assuming she becomes the village president, if she would continue on the NSSRA board. And you know, I don't think it's an issue. I wanted the board to be aware of it, that we've done some analysis behind it as to why these intergovernmental agreements are different than other types of arrangements that the village might have. And see if you had any questions about that.
And I will say, certainly, we can all debate whether me continuing at SWACO might be a good thing or not for the village. But I do think that having Chris serve probably as mayor, seemingly most likely, and remain in a position of influence at NSSRA strikes me as something of benefit, because obviously you would have more influence on the organization. So given that it's the sort of thing that can be shuffled around, I agree with Bruce that I don't think these were what were intended the same when they talked about incompatible offices. So we don't see a whole lot of comments. So Bruce, you either put everybody to sleep or you explained it well and they understand. So anything else? Any questions for the council? Okay, the village ecologist is not here this evening. Police report.
The police activity since the last meeting is in the packets. Excuse me. I did want to take just a minute to talk about the police reform bill that I'm sure many of you have heard about. A couple things about that quickly. Number one is I think some people are saying that the Illinois Chiefs of Police as a whole are against this police reform bill. In my discussions with other chiefs and what's being put out by the officers who are on the board, is that we support police reform bill, and we've always supported anything that leads to reform. There's just some parts of the bill that we don't think should be in the bill that we think is going to hurt public safety and not help it. But there are many parts of the bill that we agree with. For instance, there's a lot about training. One thing in training is that officers will receive 40 hours of de-escalation training. Riverwoods officers, including me, we've all already received 40 hours of crisis intervention training, which is de-escalation training. And much of, if not all of what they're proposing, we're already doing anyway, at least in Riverwoods we are. So I don't have a problem with things like that. I don't have a problem with getting rid of, and the chiefs don't, we don't have a problem with getting rid of bad officers. We think it should be easier to decertify bad officers so they can't turn around and work at other places. I've had officers apply here full and part-time, and if we just Google them, we find enough to know that we don't even want to interview them. And how are they even still certified? But you know, that's something that we agree with. Should be handled where officers can get decertified in a much easier way than what's happening now. So we don't have problems with that. We do have problems with things where they talk about there's certain use of force language in there and arrest language that I think is going to hurt the public. Just as an example, and I think this might be something that's unintended by the sponsors of the bill, and I think that it could probably get corrected in a trailer bill. But for instance, we're not allowed, once this is signed and goes into law, when we have somebody who's committed a Class B misdemeanor, we can't take them into custody, which we usually don't anyway. We can only, according to the bill, we can only issue them a notice to appear or a ticket and send them on their way, which is what we do most of the time. But an exception that wasn't thought about was trespassing. So if somebody is trespassing on a person's property and we get there and we determine it is trespassing and we tell the person to leave and they refuse, basically we can write them a ticket and that's all we can do. We can't force them off the property or take them into custody. So I don't think anybody wants that, but I think that's one of the things that needs to be cleaned up. There's some use of force language in there that we think needs to be changed. For instance, I had my notes here, I'm sorry, but basically there's some language that we think where they're trying to limit our use of force, they're actually creating an endangerment to people in the public, the way they have it worded. And again, that might not be, I don't believe that's intended. I think that just needs to be cleaned up. So when you hear that police chiefs are against the entire bill, if you've heard that, that's not accurate. We support much of what is in there. And we are working with our senators and representatives, and I've met with some myself, and I got a meeting with Senator Morrison and some other chiefs on Thursday to discuss the bill and hopefully a trailer bill.
The other items that I know we're all concerned about is with.
John, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. I always have to mute when the chief is on or we get an echo here. the body cam issue comes into play as well, that if there's a body cam tape, as the war statutes reads, the officer cannot view the tape when he's making his report, which sounds more like a gotcha trap than somebody trying to make sure we get accurate reports. So that's something we're concerned about. Also, if they violate a policy in relation to body cams, that becomes a class 3 felony, even though it may be our internal village policy, which I'm not sure I want to have the state's attorney enforcing a class 3 felony when in fact we're talking about something that the chief and the mayor should be enforcing. So again, we understand much of this bill, much of it frankly will have little effect on the Riverwoods Police Department because we've already been meeting these standards and more. But there are some things where people trying to fix a bad problem, I think, have made some mistakes. So I've been working with the chief to talk with some of our senators and representatives as well. So please, we'd be very happy to talk with you, and please feel free to talk to our elected representatives as well. This is, like so many cases, those of us that went to law school know that hard cases make bad law, and that's kind of what we're dealing with here. Is a few bad instances can create something that we go a little bit too far the other way. We want to make sure we don't do that as well. And frankly, we seem to be having a pretty good response from most of the elected officials. They have made some effort. We all know this is a very touchy subject too. So
the original bill, draft of the bill that they brought forth would have been terrible. I think a lot of officers would have been retiring and resigning had it passed, or had they presented that. But we did talk to our senators, I did, and our representatives, and the Illinois chiefs, were speaking in Springfield and explaining what they thought was wrong with a lot of the language. And the House did actually go back and then take out a lot of that language. So this version of the bill, it's got some issues, but it's got some good things too. But the original bill that they put out there would have been terrible. So they listened to us and they did make some changes already.
Okay, Chief, anything else? Okay, any questions for the chief? All right then. Snow, under information and comments, snow plowing we talked about. The art collection, one of our residents called me last week, said he was moving, and his original plan was to let his house become a private museum for his 3,000 piece art collection. He is exhibited in London and other places. I told him that that wouldn't fit our zoning exactly, but there might be a way something can be worked out. Well, unfortunately, it turns out now he has to sell his home as well. So that plan has gone by the way. He is willing to try and very interested in trying to keep his art collection here in Riverwoods. I think we'd all like to do it. I'm just not sure how or where. So I'm looking into it. And certainly if any of you have any ideas or thoughts on it, please let me know. As I say, it's not a real easy nut to crack given the nature of this. I can't think of any place offhand that necessarily would be a good location. I don't think our corporate residents would want to be letting people into their property that way, although they might not mind having the art collection. So
Your house is
again,
going to be vacant, John.
yes, I'm sorry, Rick.
Your house is going to be vacant.
No, it's not. But there is some space around you, I think. We could all run over to Mr. Haber's house. It's vacant right now.
How
Cheryl?
extensive is, what kind of art and how extensive is the collection?
It's
What kind of
everything
space is
from
needed?
paintings to statuary to sculpture. And I couldn't give you that much on size, Cheryl. It
Have
fits right now into a home that people are living in. So that gives
Have
you
you-
some idea, but
Is the Brushwood Center too small?
I think it might be. So, and that may be an option we have to look at. So I've got
So,
that in mind.
Yeah,
but
maybe partly at the Brushwood Center and partly at the Village Hall is all I could
It
think
could
of.
be. He has offered to have an exhibit here once we ever get past the pandemic, which I thought would of course be a reasonable idea. That's one of the reasons why we designed this building. But Again, this may be one of these things that just won't work out, but too bad we can't buy the tennis court and put it in there. That would have been the perfect answer for a lot of things. So that's all I've got at this point. Any questions or anything you want to raise? Not hearing it, Chief, do we have any call-ins?
We do not.
Okay. We have nobody who has emailed to address the board. So I'd like to move on to approval of bills. May I have a motion of approval of bills, please?
So
So moved.
moved.
Second.
Further
One or the other.
discussion or question?
I just wanted to let you know there was an AES bill and it was listed as the Village Garden, and I requested that that
Susie
be
and I
corrected.
talked
It was
about that.
corrected.
She thought the Village Garden was the plant committee's garden, and I advised her that it was the other garden, so we caught that. And the snow plowing, Henry, that you had, I've gone through it and it's appropriate, so that was addressed as well. Any other questions? If not, may I have a roll call then on the motion to approve the bills?
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein,
Aye.
trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to action items. We have only one action item this evening. Memo or item A, approval of amendment to redevelopment agreement with Riverwoods Development Partners LLC. And I put in parens Thornton's because that's what most of us think about when that comes up. Council?
I hope the memo is almost self-explanatory. By approving this amendment, we would confirm that the due diligence period or feasibility period had expired. The earnest money that they have up is $30,000, would be at risk unless we default or something else happens. The timing for applying for the zoning would be pushed back to July 10th would be the outside date. And everything else basically in the amendment it's what we prepared, except you'll see it's a red line. Counsel for the developer asked for a little bit of an extension on the start date. Rather than committing to starting by April 30 of 2022 to start by July 31 of 2022. And then the finish date, which would only be extended by 30 days from November 30 to December 31. Those were changes that the board didn't discuss. So we left them in as the red lines so that both the developer can explain why they would like that consideration, and then the board can decide what it wants to do.
And if I may interrupt for a moment, you saw me look at my phone. Just so the record knows, trustee Goldstein has been having some problems being bumped off a couple of times, and he was just talking with me about the electronic connection. No other business being conducted there. So we'll make sure that it's all above board so everybody knows what it was.
So Andy or Mike Krasuki from Thorns is here. Do either of you want to explain what your request is to the board?
The request on extending the dates for the no later than date to start construction was from us more so than from Andy. We just wanted to give ourselves a few months of flexibility just in case for whatever reason we couldn't get going. We would commit to opening in 2022. We probably will have a 6-month construction window as well from construction start to opening. We would like, obviously it pushed back a couple months. Just primarily due to the complexity of the project with the road work that needs to be done. But we would more than likely be starting earlier. I guess we just want a little flexibility in case we need it. We would, we would prefer to be starting or constructing in kind of a normal construction season, April, May through, kind of the fall. But just in case we get into a bind, we don't really like finishing up our projects in December. It's a struggle on operations group also, but it just kind of gives us a little bit of an outside cushion just in case we need it. That's why we made the request.
Any more comment from the LLC? If not, questions from the board, comments? I'm not seeing or hearing any, then so,
I don't have a problem with it.
okay. Hearing none, then do I have a motion to approve the amendment to the redevelopment agreement with Riverwoods Development Partners LLC?
So moved.
Second.
I'll let the clerk sort out which was which. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please. On the-
Like a bunch of overachievers in this group.
Everybody wants to get out.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein,
Aye.
trustee Haber. Trustee Haber,
I,
Unmute.
we lost trustee Haber for a minute, so
Mm.
everybody talk slow on your vote.
I'll come back to him. Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jamerson,
Aye.
There you go. Okay, so that's the full vote of those who are here, so the motion has approved. We'll talk a little bit here before we go on, because Mr. Haber has the first standing committee report too. So we need to get him back. I will leave open the question for right now as to the final vote on the motion. Moving on to standing committees, trustee Chamberlain.
Nothing other than what's in the packet.
I liked your first report where it has absolutely nothing in it. That's easy to put into words. Trustee Jamerson.
The construction report for January is in the packet. You will notice that Mike's back.
Yes.
You will notice that our construction permits are up, but our construction value is down, mainly because Discover did some work in January of last year, took a permit out in January of last year, which bumped up our construction value as well as the permit fees, because they were doing something, the last bit of their overall plan. So that's where we are.
Trustee Haber, we have not concluded the vote on item A yet because we wanted to let you make your vote since you froze out.
Thank you.
So do you vote A or nay on the agreement?
I'll vote in favor.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, now I have a final total. It's unanimous in favor.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Mike, don't turn off your microphone too soon because you're the first standing committee report.
I don't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Goldstein.
No report.
Okay, trustee Hollander.
I did another survey of our SSAs regarding snow plowing. Of course, I did it in the middle of the season instead of in July and August when I should have done it. But we did find a large SSA that did not have anyone that could plow their streets. I contacted the village's snowplow service, SE, and they were quite willing to provide snow plowing to any SSA that found themselves in need, and did this without any difficulty, and were willing to match whatever price they were given beforehand. So I thought that was beneficial.
So, okay. Trustee Clayton.
One note is that our financial consultants have indicated that the board needs to accept the 2019 audit. And that's never been brought before the board for formal acceptance of the audit results, which probably requires a presentation by the auditors to the board.
Would actually require a presentation of the audit itself, which I don't think I've seen, and I'm sure the board hasn't.
No, well, I have.
Well, you want to share?
There were no material things that came up in the management letter other than things we've heard already or not working on. Other things, we have quite a number of activities underway right at the moment. We're reviewing all of our reports, the timing, the format, how the analysis goes with it. We're reviewing the chart of accounts with regard to the budget. We're looking at the general fund to capital fund transfer, and we're in the midst of transitioning to modified accrual accounting. And we're also revisiting our staffing plan. So there's quite a lot going on in the finance area.
Any questions for trustee Clayton? Hearing none, I know of no reason to go into executive session. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is Tuesday, February 16th, 2021 at 7:30. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none, roll call, please. Darn it.
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Goldstein,
Aye.
trustee Haber,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee
Aye.
Jamerson.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Everybody go out and try to stay warm, especially you, Mr. Haber.
Bruce and Daphne, could
Night,
you hold over
everybody.
for a minute?